Aloha and welcome to Voices of Truth One-on-One with Hawaii's Future, brought to you by the Kauai Foundation. I'm Mehu Kekahu Cardwell, and here we are today in Honolulu at Kapiolani Park, and I promise you this, we got a fascinating guest on the show, so let's go on over here and meet him. Willy, aloha.
Aloha.
How are you?
I'm good. How are you doing?
Good, thank you. Dr. Willy Kauai, did I say your name right?
Absolutely, yes.
Wonderful. And you are up at University of Hawaii, yes?
Yes, I am.
And tell us what you do up there.
For the past 4 or 5 years, I've actually been lecturing. I've lectured in the political science department, ethnic studies department. Also here at Kapiolani Community College, I also lectured in Hawaiian studies. Just recently, I just was appointed to a new position at the University of Hawaii at Manoa. I'm now the director of Native Hawaiian Student Services.
Wow.
Which falls under the umbrella or within the College of Hawaii Nui Akea, School of Hawaiian Knowledge.
Wow, amazing. So when you were lecturing, what did you lecture about?
While I was lecturing, my focus often in my classes really had to do with Hawaii, Hawaii politics. I was able to kind of develop a lot of my research that I was doing at the time while lecturing. At the time, I was a PhD student in the political science department, doing a dissertation on citizenship laws in Hawaii, particularly in the 19th century.
So, citizenship laws of the Hawaiian Kingdom, yes?
Citizenship laws of the Hawaiian Kingdom, correct.
Wow.
Yes, yes.
Well, that's why we wanted to have you on the show today on Voices of Truth, because we want to talk about that. And so you discovered some amazing things in your research about citizenship laws in the Hawaiian Kingdom, yes?
Yes.
Tell us a little bit about that.
One of the ways in which I got into this project was by noticing, but also realizing that there really wasn't written a lot about, or there really wasn't a lot of research that focused primarily on citizenship within the 19th century. And if you look at the literature today, there isn't one book that's written on that history of citizenship yet.
You can't go grab a book about it. It doesn't exist, right?
No, not yet. And if you go to any other country in the world, there's
plenty of books.
There's plenty of books on that specific topic. There's also plenty of articles written, scholarly articles that are written on that specific topic. When you start to look at that history of citizenship, there's a number of really, really, I think, significant aspects within that history. Not just when we're looking at Hawaii's history, but on a more global scale.
As not only in Hawaii, but as Hawaii related to the rest of the world is what you're saying, yes?
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely. I mean, with the development of the Hawaiian Constitution, beginning in the 1840s, I mean, with the development of that Constitution, with the creation of the legislature and legislative enactments, you start to see citizenship. Right? This topic of citizenship starts to emerge within the legislature. What is fascinating, I think, about it is that when we're talking about the criteria to acquire Hawaiian citizenship, race wasn't a factor. Race, ethnicity didn't play a factor in the creation of those laws, or even in the acquisition of acquiring Hawaiian citizenship. And so we're talking about naturalization laws, for example, that were racially inclusive. And this is 20 years before the 14th Amendment is even written into the U.S. Constitution.
Wow.
This is 20 years before the American Civil War even pops off.
So once again, we see an instance of where Hawaii was way ahead of the rest of the world.
Absolutely, and I think there's a number of great examples. I mean, you have the experiences of a number of African Americans, former slaves who escaped the grip of their slave masters from the American South.
They came here to Hawaii?
Find their way to Hawaii.
Wow.
Naturalize and become Hawaiian, right? So even that term that we that we use today, our understanding of the term Hawaiian had a completely different meaning, completely different context in the 19th century than it does today.
So that's something I wanted to ask you about. So back then, when the term Hawaiian was used, it didn't mean the blood, the cocoa. It meant nationality, like American, or even like Californian.
Yes.
It meant the place you were from, the place you were a citizen of, yes?
Absolutely.
So African people, Hispanic people, Asian people, Caucasian people, anybody could be Hawaiian because it's their nationality, not their race.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Back then, Hawaiian by blood, you called that Kanaka Maoli, right?
Yeah, there was other terms that were used as well too, but that was one term that was also used as well. Kanaka Maoli also referred to as pure-blooded or full Hawaiian. I mean full Aboriginal, full Native. If
Back
you will.
then.
Back then, yeah. The one thing that we need to understand is that race operated very differently in the Hawaiian Kingdom than it was in the rest of the world.
So tell us the difference.
Race evolved.
Tell us the difference.
Well, I think the main difference is you didn't have a system, a legal political system that was guided by the ideals of white supremacy. That didn't exist in the Hawaiian Kingdom. One of the ways in which we know that, because brown people were in the legislature. Right?
So there wasn't racial oppression back then, is what you're saying, correct?
I mean, there might need to be research on that, but I would make the argument that racial oppression didn't look like anywhere else in the world. It was specific to Hawaii.
And it didn't look anything like it does today, right?
No, absolutely not.
Yeah.
Right. So that's when, I mean, with the coming of the United States, with the occupation of the Hawaiian Kingdom by the United States, that's when you start to see these full-blown racial ideologies being instituted through all kinds of ways and means, but particularly law, that gets fully engrafted into the Hawaiian Kingdom.
And that's unfortunately how Hawaiians ended up at the bottom of the barrel, yes?
Yeah, I mean, when you look at the demographics of the 19th century, I mean, when you talk about the Aboriginal people, I mean, they're educated, they're literate, they were public servants, right? They were a part of the legislature, they were a part of the police department, the fire department, they were teachers. They were in a good place, a good social standing, I would argue, right? Both politically, both socially, and this is what I think is important to also realize too. We're talking about a people that was on the brink of extinction. I mean, we're talking about during those times in the 19th century, people who are living through the overthrow and going through the annexation. They have already had horrendous experiences.
You're talking about a group of people who went from about 1 million people down to 40,000, yes?
And so
yet they were able to do this in their own
amazing. Not only did they survive, but they persevered.
They thrived.
They thrived. Right? They even created a public healthcare system for themselves to help the sick.
Amazing.
Right? So I think that ultimately always has to come into context, right? When we're talking about these people that were there during the time of the overthrow annexation, I mean, they've went through some pretty hard times. I mean, as individuals, but also their family. At that time, I'm sure everybody knew a family member, many family members that had perished, right, when that disease hit.
Willie, back in the 19th century, you researched a lot of what occurred, what went on in the Hawaiian Kingdom in a social context, yeah? And tell us about how the different races of people that were here, that were all called Hawaiian back at that time, because they were Hawaiian nationals, meaning Hawaiian citizens, did they fight each other or did they work together?
I think that's one of the things that's often missing in our understanding of Hawaii's history is that in the Hawaiian Kingdom it was a multi-ethnic, multiracial population, right? National population, not just the national population, but also aliens as well too. Often when we think about these more critical moments in Hawaiian history, be it the overthrow or annexation, we often think it's a brown Aboriginal Hawaiian fighting a white guy. right? That's kind of the image that we come up with in our head. I think when you start to look at that a little closer, it's actually, a number of different brown people that are pushing back against white people, right? And so in that sense, we're talking about this multi-ethnic national population when their country is being threatened, right? And this is beginning, I would say, in 1887, right? You're starting to see kind of this emergence of white supremacy start to kind of blossom,
yes,
right, within the legal system of the country. You start to see resistance. We've concentrated a lot on the Aboriginal population's resistance to the Bayonet Constitution or the overthrow annexation. I think what we haven't concentrated enough on was the multi-ethnic alliances that were taking place.
Okay,
right?
so that's what I want to ask you about. Prior to the overthrow, before that came into the picture with some strength and velocity, tell us about the multi-ethnic, multiracial alliances that were an everyday part of life in the Hawaiian Kingdom.
I think an easy one to point out is the Aboriginal Hawaiian and the Chinese. Right? There are a number of those marriages that take place in the 19th century. Hawaiian-Chinese marriages, I mean, are a perfect example of these alliances that are taking place. A lot of the Aboriginal population's kane, or male, population is on the decline. You definitely see these earlier, I think, examples of Hawaiians and Chinese intermingling in the 19th century.
Intermarrying in the 19th
intermarrying
century.
in the 19th century. But you also see them as business partners as well too, right? Chinese are also very kind of embedded into the kingdom's economic system.
Wow.
By the time the 1890s come around, the Chinese have the most business licenses, more than any other ethnic group. So they were a central kind of figure within the Hawaiian Kingdom's economic system.
Wow.
Yeah.
You know what blows my mind, Willie, is that today, I mean, it seems like people's concept, it's a wrong concept, misconception, but people's concept today is only Hawaiians, you know, Hawaiian by blood, or for the restoration of the Hawaiian Kingdom.
Yeah.
And yet, back in kingdom days, everybody was for the Hawaiian Kingdom. And just like you said, the Chinese had the most business licenses. Everybody was pro Hawaiian Kingdom back then.
I wouldn't say everybody, because there's that small minority of white people.
Yes.
I mean, predominantly white people.
But the overwhelming majority of the
absolutely,
people,
yeah.
they were all strong. They loved their country.
I mean, and they were. I would argue, yes, they did love their country, but they're also doing it for practical reasons as well. Right? The Chinese are looking at the United States, their rule book, their laws, and they can see that there's a Chinese Exclusion Act there, right? That's passed in 1882.
In the U.S.
In the United States.
Yes.
Right? So they can almost forecast, right? If there's this prospect of annexation to the United States, right?
What's going to happen to them?
What's going to happen to them? And you start to see that in 1887, right? When the Bayonet Constitution is imposed into the Hawaiian Kingdom, you start to see this talk of annexation, right? So for that 10 years later, that whole decade later, from 1887 to 1897, there's this constant talk of annexation, right? Chinese are mobilizing, right? They don't want to become a part of the United States. Why? Because that would subject them to anti-Asian laws, anti-Asian sentiments, such as the Chinese Exclusion Act. You even have a number of Chinese that are shoulder to shoulder with Robert Wilcox. When Wilcox is trying to restore the Queen, right? Mm-hmm. He's working directly with the Chinese. They're actually, the Chinese here are actually working with San Francisco Chinese to send them weapons, right? They actually land weapons right outside of here.
So they were Hawaiian Kingdom patriots.
Absolutely, yeah. And for practical reasons as well too.
Sure.
Right? There was consequences to annexation that had to do with more people than just the Aboriginal population.
Sure.
Everybody was going to be affected by this.
Sure.
And you see that fight. They're fighting throughout the whole entire lead up to annexation. When the Bayonet Constitution comes around, right, it's not just the Aboriginal population who is targeted, right? Who this white minority is trying to strip their political rights. It's also the Chinese, right? Chinese also get stripped of their political rights. Why? Not because they were powerless, but because they were powerful.
They were powerful.
They were powerful.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
And they were allowed to become a part of the kingdom society.
Yeah.
Right? That's the interesting. And that's kind of also unique to Hawaii as well too. Right?
It's one of Hawaii's hidden stories, isn't it?
There isn't many places in the world, there are a few, but there isn't many places in the world where Chinese were being accepted, allowed to become a part of another country.
In that era.
In that era.
They are very much discriminated against all around the world, except in Hawaii.
Absolutely, absolutely.
That's amazing.
You start to see all those discriminatory laws come into place post 1887, post 1893,
When the overthrow
post 1898 annexation.
Wow.
Yeah.
Willie, tell us about what happened to you when you started to discover this. So let's start here. How did you begin to discover this stuff?
Oh, I would say that it happened in a class I was taking in Hawaiian Studies around the year 2002.
At the University of Hawaii.
At the University of Hawaii at Manoa, began taking some classes with Kanalu Young, and at the time, Kanalu was really kind of going through this transition in his scholarship. He had started to kind of revisit a lot of these notions of Hawaiian history, including this topic of Hawaiian citizenship or Hawaiian nationality. So it was really kind of in his class where he kind of turned my world upside down. Right? I grew up on the island of Maui, born from a brown-skinned father and a white mother. And so I've always had to I've always been confronted with issues of Hawaiian identity, right?
Primarily in each world, huh?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Especially because of my skin color being fair. And I mean, it created a lot of confrontation, right? In a lot of situations growing up in Hawaii.
You got a lot of, you Hawaiian?
Absolutely. Yeah, that was a common question that we were always asked in Hawaii, right? What often came before that question was, what are your nationalities, right? And our common response is to rattle off all of our ethnicities, right? Our various races, if you will.
But that's different.
Very different. And so, but for me at the time, right, I would say I'm Hawaiian, I'm Haole, right? Those are the things. Often, when you say that you're Hawaiian, there's always a follow-up question: how much Hawaiian you?
Yeah.
Right. So now we're talking blood quantum.
Yeah.
Now we're talking a whole entire measurement of identity.
Yeah.
Right. That, of course, for me growing up, I had no idea what that was connected to, what that was tied to. But so really, it was Kanalu who kind of made me kind of have to kind of revisit my own past. Race operated very differently in the 19th century, right? And that term Hawaiian didn't mean what it means today, right? It had a completely different meaning.
So did that give you a newfound sense of freedom for you today, or what?
Absolutely, yeah. I think. I mean, when we talk about students going to the university, it's a lot of us. That's kind of where we were taught about a Hawaiian identity, right? And many of its complications. Kanalu kind of opened up a whole nother realm for me to look into, right? This topic of what it meant to be Hawaiian in the 19th century and how very different it was in today's understanding of that term Hawaiian.
So by looking at what occurred in the 19th century allowed you to redefine for yourself who you are today, yes?
Absolutely.
As well as who you're not.
Yeah, but it also made me very, I think, conscious, made me very, very critical about the system that we're now having to operate within, right? A system that was born and bred in the United States. What's so empowering about that history of citizenship is that it has profound implications today.
What kind of implications? Tell us about that.
Well, if we're talking about the United States having illegally occupied Hawaii for more than 121 years, then we're left to answer the question, okay, who comprises the national population today? Under international law, not going into all the technicalities of it, but the short answer to that question of who comprises the national population today is anyone who can trace their national lineage to a Hawaiian national descendant, right, prior to annexation, would be considered a Hawaiian national today.
Automatically.
Automatically, right? The idea of the entire law of occupation is to preserve the status quo, right? What was the status quo before the occupation began? Hawaiian nationals were multi-ethnic. There were many. The Aboriginal population always comprised the majority, like they would in any other country, right? But it was multi-ethnic. If we're talking about a de-occupation taking place, right? Well, a lot of those answers with regard to race, a lot of those answers with regard to citizenship are all in the 19th century. Yeah? That's where we're going to get our answers to all the questions that we're going to have in the event of the United States deoccupying Hawaii.
Okay, so Willie, as you have lectured about this to students up at University of Hawaii, and they hear this information probably for the first time, what's been their reaction?
Many of them are shocked.
I bet.
Many of them shocked, and not just the students that come from the U.S. continent, but even those that were born and raised in Hawaii are like, what? There's no treaty? What? The term Hawaiian that we understood it in the context of our lives today had a completely different meaning in the 19th century. So absolutely shocked, right? And that, I think, is a consequence of the American education system that was created shortly after annexation. Yeah? So a lot of my students, they are very interested. The one thing that has always, I think, been a barrier to this type of scholarship really getting out is that it has real legal and political consequences today. And so I think many times it's hard for these established institutions to welcome this kind of scholarship with open arms. So there's been a lot of challenges in finding venues, institutionalized venues, to get this scholarship out.
To get the word out.
To get the word out.
Yeah. A lot of people don't want to hear this.
No, they don't. And that's unfortunate because, I mean, I think the most interesting thing about all of this is, and why I think students are so intrigued by this scholarship and research is because you're talking about the truth and you're talking about the law, right? And those are two things that are hard to argue against.
It's obvious that back in the 19th century in the Hawaiian Kingdom that people didn't have near as much focus on race as they do today. And people worked together a lot more harmoniously than they do today. Why do you think it is that it was that way back then, and it's today people are so fighting against each other all the time?
Oh, that's a dissertation in itself. I mean, and that's I think a question that I really would say needs a lot more scholarship and interest in is questions just like that, right? What made the Hawaiian Kingdom so unique, if you want to use that term?
Well,
even though it wasn't in the context of Hawaii, that was normal.
Yeah, but
right?
the rest of the
in
world,
the rest of the world, it was
cutting edge.
Cutting edge, unique.
Yeah.
Right. I think even thinking about it into the future is, and I kick myself for doing this, but asking the question, what would have happened if the United States didn't annex Hawaii in 1898?
Yes.
Where would we be in terms of society today? Where would we be in terms of race, in terms of class, in terms of socioeconomic status, right? In education. So I think these kinds of questions are important because they give us hope for the future.
Yes.
Right? they let us know that that we're not starting from scratch, right? That we have, I think, a foundation, a clear blueprint of how to run these islands, how to run these places with people that have different skin colors and talk differently, and that blueprint is in the 19th century.
I really like that, what you said, a clear blueprint of how to do it all over again. I mean, it can be done again like that, yes?
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, and one of these days we're gonna come to the reality that not only that it can be done again, but it has to.
It must be.
It has to. It has to.
Because if we don't, the cost is way too great.
Absolutely, yeah.
Wow, wow. And you know what, that's where we have to leave it. Dr. Willy Kauai, mahalo for being on Voices of Truth.
Thank you.
And the message you've brought to us today and our viewers all around the world. Thank you so much for being here, and please keep doing what you're doing. And to our viewers, mahalo to you for joining us on this very interesting visit with Dr. Willy Kauai. Remember, you can watch us on the web on voicesoftruth.tv.com, and you can like Voices of Truth on Facebook. I'm Kahu Cardwell for the Kauai Foundation, and until next time, hui ho! Mahalo for watching Voices of Truth one-on-one with Hawaii's Future. Watch us on the web 24/7 at voicesoftruth.tv.com. You'll find all our shows, including this one, in case you want to see it again or share it with family and friends. Also view our weekly video commentaries at freehawaiitv.com. And check out our blog, published daily, at freehawaii.info. It's all part of the Free Hawaii Broadcasting Network.